Our discussion tonight is about the gig economy and prospects in East Africa. So it's quite an interesting discussion to have at this point because of the various considerations of where the gig economy is moving towards, but then also the history within East Africa and what it looks like. So as you will appreciate from the discussions that we have, each country, each region presents different and unique aspects, which once like the digital economy comes in, then there's a different outcome to it. So it's very good to have our panelists tonight as who have introduced themselves, and we will go right on to the discussion, and we will go back and forth with each panelist giving their thought on the topic. But if I could quickly highlight on what Africa Asia does. So Africa Asia is a platform where we have discussions on issues that affect Africa, but these are issues within the digital economy, within tax, within Africa trade. And the whole idea is to just have people from different African countries exchanging ideas and discussing things that would help move the continent forward and give thought and input on policies that are made within the continent. So as far as the gig economy is concerned, if I may give just a quick definition of what it is, it's this economy which is characterized by temporary, flexible jobs, where companies hire independent contractors, freelancers instead of full-time employees. And then it's different from the traditional economy, where the traditional economy, they are full-time workers who often focus on their career development. And then the work within the gig economy will range from driving for Uber, delivering food. So within East Africa, there's Uber, there's Glovo, there's the local businesses that have the same kind of freelance kind of work. There's also like freelance writing of articles, writing code, and that kind of thing. So it's that kind of environment. But then also within East Africa, there's the informal sector, the completely informal sector, which is not even driven by the digital economy. So I will first go with Becky, and you can start off the discussion. You can give perspectives both from Kenya and also from observations in South Africa where you're based. Like, what is the scenario of the gig economy, and what is the interaction between the formal and the informal sectors? And also, when we're speaking about the gig economy, how much can a person working within that economy earn to support their living? Becky?
Thanks, Christine. I think in terms of where we are, I would say, first of all, on the question of what are the prospects for or in East Africa, I find the gig economy as a fitting model for expanding the economy in East Africa. And generally for developing countries, it's been a very favorable development for several reasons. And I'll use Kenya as an example because we have some good data about the informal economy. So there are three things that I think make the gig economy a very favorable thing. And the first thing is, in Kenya, informal employment accounts for over 80% of total jobs. That was even before the gig economy. But in the current situation, a 2019 survey by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics showed that in 2019, out of 840,000 jobs that were created in 2019, 762,000 of them were in the informal sector. So that would be all your Geokali people, all the freelancers. So with the backdrop of this is how it's been historically, that we have more jobs in the informal sector than in the formal sector, it means that we are no strangers to freelancing and on-demand services. The only thing that is different now is that the gig economy is technologically powered or technologically enabled. So that makes it, and that's why I think it's not been very difficult for people to move their services to, of course, there have been friction here and there, like the taxi industry, but it hasn't been that difficult for people to move from what they were doing to adopting these platforms, because we are already used to most of our workforce being informal. And then the second factor that I think makes it ripe for East Africa is we have available labor. And using Africa in general, we have the youngest workforce and we have the highest unemployment. So you have a young generation, people who are graduating from, universities and high schools, who there are no formal jobs, there are no white collar jobs for them. We are churning them at a higher rate because we have a very good population growth rate, but we don't have enough formal jobs to absorb them. So the coincidence here is that we have more young people than other places in the world. So which means that this generation is more tech savvy, and therefore they are able to keep up with these trends and take up these opportunities. So that's why you have a lot of young people taking up jobs as riders, as Uber drivers. So that's the second thing. We have labor. The third thing is mobile money. It's one of the things that has made it easy for people to quickly transition, like for a taxi driver to transition to, taking Uber and the others, and freelancers who do all other kinds of jobs, including online writing and things like that. One of the major issues with new technologies is, resistance. It depends how foreign that technology and that transition feels to someone. But for instance, if you tell someone in Kenya you can only pay for services using cards or cash, that would be a lot of business loss there in between. But when you tell a gig worker, whatever, a freelancer to write articles for you, and you can pay them by M-Pesa, or you tell a taxi driver, if they're on the platform, someone can pay directly to the M-Pesa, that reduces a lot of a huge adoption barrier, where people are already comfortable with mobile money, with the payment mechanism behind the gig platform. So those are the three factors that I think make the gig economy ripe, because we are ready for it, because we need these jobs that the informal sector can create, that the gig economy can create, because we have people, we are churning them by the millions every year, and we don't have jobs in the formal economy that can that they can plug into. And I don't think there is any projection that countries are going to be able to create that amount of matching formal jobs in the formal economy. So the gig economy is sort of a very good solution. And the fact that the most of our people who are unemployed are young means they're also likely to be tech savvy. So it won't be a barrier, because also adoption of technology would be a barrier if the people who need the jobs are not skilled to use these kind of technologies. So in a broad sense, that's what I feel about the prospects for East Africa.
Becky, thanks a lot. That's quite some good insight. Jane, do you what's the perspective from Uganda? And also if you could speak about how digitalized are the gigs in Uganda within the informal sector, and is there a need to move more from just the informal sector outside the digital economy into the digital economy, transition that?
All right, thanks a lot. So first of all, say that the Rebecca's submission about Kenya and maybe South Africa, based of high experiences, would apply to Uganda as well, because of similar cultures, similar challenges, and almost similar stages of development in where we are. But just to give the Uganda perspective, so historically, the gig economy or gigs were synonymous with creatives. So you really only had, this concept being used by musicians or poets or DJs or other creatives that had an avenue to sell their service. And a lot of the other professions, writers and journalists or broadcasters did not really have that flexibility for independence or a platform to sell their services to markets. So almost had to be tied to or institutionalized to a company. For example, if, in the past, this very segment or this discussion would have to be held in a radio or TV. But with the advent of technology, we've had a platform to do this. So that's sort of the history of it, to my mind. However, with the advent of technology, this has created a platform for virtually every professional or every person to be able to sell the service that they have. So again, tying this to the question that you asked, historically, again, a lot of what we call the gig economy will have been somewhat informal and very little formality to it. But again, with the advent of technology and more interest from bigger players, I think the gig economy is becoming more formalized. For example, you have teachers and accountants having their own YouTube channels and being able to sell their services independently or as freelancers, something that you couldn't do a few years ago. So there's definitely a trend towards formalizing the gig economy. And this applies across, in transportation, in accommodation. Instead of going to a hotel now, I can literally go into my Airbnb and book accommodation, that flexibility that comes with it. And also to add to that, if the past year taught us anything, it's the need and the importance of flexibility and convenience that we all need when it comes to accessing different services. With COVID, it quickly became important to us, or we realized how important it is for me to sit in the comfort of my home and be able to purchase or do my shopping or order for goods or whatever it is that I wanted to do. And there's no better economy, I think, at this point to give that to us than the gig economy, because one, it gives us access to very many individuals willing to provide the service. And also because there's a lot of competition to provide that service, the quality of those services is only getting better and better. Secondly, because again, coming from an investment background, there's a lot more interest by the capital markets in the gig economy. So we're likely to see a lot more capital being injected in this sector or this gig economy. And the services as we know them today, or the economy as we know it today, is going to get better. And that alone will drive it from its current informal nature towards a more formal economy or avenue for services. So again, from my experience with Uganda and my observations, that is sort of the trend that I see.
Thanks a lot for that perspective from Uganda. So, Felix, if I may ask, because you have the understanding of how the Kenya informal sector works, how much, like the Juakali sector, which for those who don't know what that sector is, Felix will try and explain a bit. And then also seeing from your living experience outside of Kenya and how the gig economy is working, like in the US. How far apart are they, and how can even people within the informal sector within Kenya bridge that gap by moving more towards the digital side?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I'll start by providing a perspective on my observation on the disparities between Kenya and the US in terms of the digital economy. I just think that the US is a little bit ahead in terms of the digital economy and the number of people embracing it. It's a bit more, and this definitely has to do with the stages of development between the two countries. The US is pretty much embraced technology fully. Most people are tech savvy, and then there's also the normal attitudes between people. People in the US are more open towards things like online shopping, the delivery of food. For example, I would quote one of the apps that I use that is called a Grubhub, where I pretty much just go in and select what I want, and then somebody will deliver it. So it's that person delivering it, and it's almost like an Uber Eats. But then our attitude mostly when I was in Kenya, I couldn't order it. I was like, I need to go and actually get it myself. So pretty much that would become one of the driving factors that that would need if Kenya is to move, like for example, to embracing more of a gig economy and creating employment from that sector. Those are the changes in attitudes that would have to happen, and rightfully so, they're already happening. And more and more people are actually accepting, like they're beginning to understand, to just view like the online deliveries being similar to just somebody taking a task off you. And I think most Kenyan, most East Africa in general, is pretty like well positioned in terms of taking advantage of it, in the sense that for a gig economy to actually, from my perspective, for a gig economy to actually be successful, you need a lot of technological, I would say, like I'll give an example of the of access to the internet. That would be one of the major factors, because pretty much the interaction between like the buyer and the seller, in this sense, the person receiving the service and the person actually offering it, usually happens over the internet. So the point is, if like there's more penetration of the internet in a certain area, it's more likely that the gig economy will actually work in that place, as opposed to any other place that does not offer the same. And rightfully so, Kenya internet is pretty much cheap now. Apparently, you can get a 1 GB internet bundle for a whole day for about let's say 100 or so, or sometimes Safaricom runs offers or Airtel runs offers. So I think that from my perspective is makes Kenya a ripe place for actually the gig economy. But then also there's also the perspective of the people offering the service, because in the US it's driven by mostly people selecting a certain kind of lifestyle they want to live, and having jobs that and getting gigs that would actually fit that lifestyle, and as opposed to being stuck on one place and a form of employment that they feel like they have to do it to make a living. So it's more driven by the person looking for a sense of freedom. And this is I see it more on the millennial side, who don't like being tied. It's just like a trend. It's a lifestyle trend where people are choosing, like, hey, I want to be in charge of my own time, and the gig economy offers that. It offers them a chance to earn the money they would have earned if they actually worked on a 9 to 5 job, but also offering the freedom for them to choose and make decisions about if they want to go to work, if they don't want to do it. Yeah, so that one pretty much would also has an impact on it, because in Kenya, I would say that the gig economy is mostly driven by necessity, given that as mentioned by Becky, as in it's more about people who have no jobs trying to make a living, which that is also a disparity on this other side. But then it's also like those two can, for lack of a better word, I would say, marry them, in the sense that these people are unemployed, but they have the necessary skills. The Kenyan workforce is pretty much one of the most educated, if not, yeah, in Africa. So pretty much that makes them prime for anything that they can do. Like for example, we have writers doing papers for. Anyway, I know this is a moral issue, but apparently that's part of the gig economy. They do papers for people in the UK and the US. But then, given that we have like a huge workforce that is tech savvy, that is well educated, that makes the gig economy perfect. It's just perfect for them, because I can see it anywhere. I can do an article for someone, and they can pay me, and rightfully so, with the mobile money and PayPal and everything. Anybody can pay me. So from my perspective is, the factors are right for Kenya to actually embrace the gig economy, but there's still some leap that has to be taken in terms of people's attitudes and just their view of the gig economy. because also there's also the element that to some extent the gig economy has not been recognized as an actual form of employment, like or not even employment, like a source of living. Sometimes some people view it as a bit lesser than the former ones, and also there's also the factor that a consistent income is more highly rated than a gig economy, because a gig economy pretty much is runs differently from a day to day. But from my perspective, that's probably a wrong view. But it's more of an old view of how like people should earn a living. Because if I can make enough to last me for a month within 3 days of some work I did, then that should be totally okay, and nobody should be actually be discouraged from that, because the gig economy brings in a reshuffling of skills. I offer my skills where they are most needed. And if I'm offering my skills where they are most needed, most likely I'll be paid that person, whoever I'm offering them, they will be willing to pay more than a place where I have to offer it because I have an employment contract. So that means it's a win-win situation. The companies that employ gig workers get the best skills, and the company and the person offering it gets compensated enough for his role. So I think that perspective also needs to grow in people, and that people just need to realize that, well, the gig economy offers an alternative to the unemployment, an alternative to the formal employment that is relied on at this point. I think that would be my perspective, and that would be the leap that I see between the U.S. and East Africa in general in terms of the gig economy.
Felix, that's very good input you've given. And especially a few things you've said, I just thought this is like such spot on like observations, especially on the perspective that almost looks at the gig economy as being less ranking to the formal economy. And I'll say in the perspective also of look at even like the government, how the government will treat, especially like for social security benefits for people within the gig economy, like medical benefits. Because if you see how the systems are set up, let's say like within Kenya, like there's the National Social Security Fund. I mean, it's not a lot, but if you're within the gig economy and like you're just freelancing for jobs, then that you will not be covered on that. But then because there's no employer and yourself to contribute to it. But then also the thing I'll say, I think from observations of how the perspective that Kenya has been taking is that I think in 2019 the government set up a fund to encourage freelance digital work. So it's called the Ajira Digital Fund. It looks like this is something the government should start encouraging the country, where they tell the young people, if you don't have a job, what you need to do is that enable yourself digitally, get digital skills, code, do something, and then do online writing. Like they literally invested quite a bit, and they rolled out programs within universities to equip people to be able to take advantage of gigs as they come up. But then also, like the regulations of that kind of thing, they might help to just pull up that economy and almost, like how they rolled out the training in the universities, then for the education also to be shifted more for someone to know that you can be informally employed and earn a living. And then also, I think, as you said, one seems to be like a lifestyle choice, while the other seems to be it's out of necessity. Like you are unemployed, so working with Uber is just really the only thing you can do. And that's why you hear like for Uber, the drivers in Kenya, and even if I think even the UK and the US at some point, they went to court seeking to be recognized as employees of Uber and not independent contractors. But anyway, these are very good observations on that. Becky, if I'll come back to you, and now this one is because I'm asking you because you're doing your PhD and this is a research that has been done. So researchers have warned that growing a reliance on non-standard employment, it creates fragmentation of incomes and opportunities. So what that means is that because you just earn based on like you do like an hour job today and then do a certain number of hours and odd jobs here and there depending on the gig, then what that means is that your income is fragmented. And as a result, what that means is that even if you are to save or your money to invest, then also the investments need to be relooked at because your income is not as consolidated. So, Becky, if you could comment on that and also maybe on the need for education systems within the region that need to be possibly relooked at to accommodate the gig economy. It needs a lot of self-drive and it's almost entrepreneurial. You must want it and look out for these opportunities. Like, is there more training that's needed on that? So, Becky, if you could speak up about those 2 points.
Thank you, Christine. So, yeah, there is a lot of concern. As much as we are excited as Africans, as technologists, that technology is coming and it's offering these employment opportunities where people are previously not able to find them. We are excited, and I'm personally of the opinion. I'm in tech, but I look at tech as a double-edged sword. It gives and it takes. So I'm usually cautious when I'm talking about the potential that a certain technology has, and that's no different when you think about the gig economy. And the main thing is that most workers, like if you're a rider for a delivery service or mostly the ones that have a central platform or an Uber driver, these workers are caught between a profit maximizing enterprise and customers with high expectations. So what happens when we like consumers of services move to the gig economy? We have higher expectations than we would have had if it was, some random guy that you called to do a delivery for you. So these workers are caught in between companies that want to maximize their profits and customers who want very high quality of service. And on the other side, they're not formally employed by these companies. So there are several things that they don't have, and some of these has been highlighted by you and Felix. So for instance, things are changing, but initially there were, riders and drivers who didn't have accident cover. Like besides your car being insured, there is nothing specific, that gives you comprehensive, like for instance, if you're an employee in a company, most companies have something like accidental death cover or disability cover. That's over and above your personal health insurance and other things. So there's several things that these workers don't have by virtue of being caught in between. They're not formally employed, and they're not formally employed by the companies, and they're not fully self-employed. So there are several things that they lack. The income fragmentation that you talked about, which makes it very difficult. If you want maybe to buy a car, the bank doesn't, most formal financial institutions really prefer a very consistent stream of income. So even insurers want to see a stream of income. Like you want to be sure that you'll be able to pay your premiums. So that is the main problem, being caught in between. But there is some hope. It's not, there is some hope at the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a lot of work that will need to be done to, first of all, guarantee these employees a minimum wage. There's no guarantee because the variety of platforms is so wide. We at least know the big ones, and some of them have transparent payment systems and service. You're sure of what's your cut and what's their cut. But as you go further down with smaller platforms, things get very vague. So there are people who get exploited in between. And I think COVID also brought out some of these issues in cases where we needed these delivery guys. They were out there risking their lives, but they were not treated as essential workers. They were not given PPE because they are not an employee of the company. So the company doesn't take the obligation to provide them with PPE. Yet they're out there when COVID is, thriving and nobody is taking care of them. They're expected to get money out of their small cut to buy PPE and do COVID tests and all the other compliance that is needed. So that is the biggest problem, in that they're caught in between. And the light at the end of the tunnel is that there are some organizations that are, doing advocacy for platform gig workers, to make sure that their welfare, the welfare of gig workers, is upheld as a matter of priority, because these workers are not, if there is no such advocacy going on, they end up being the horse, on the profit side. Uber, Airbnb, and everyone else is happy when work is being done and income is streaming. On this side, if it's raining outside and I want to eat a pizza, I'm happy to just dial and just, get out of the house quickly for 1 minute with an umbrella. I don't care what happens in between. So if there is no advocacy going on to make sure that the welfare of gig workers is upheld, they end up just remaining there in between and suffering the consequences, of having to do what they must do, especially in Africa, as we talked about. They're not doing it because it's a choice, it's a life choice. They're doing it because that's what probably the only opportunity they have for livelihood. So there are two organizations that I want to highlight that are making, good strides in that direction of advocacy. So the World Economic Forum and Fair Work Project. So WEF enforced the Charter of Principles for Good Platform Work, which has several of the big gig companies. Uber is there, Deliveroo, and a few others. And Fair Work also has a similar framework, which outlines 5 Fair Work principles, essentially fair pay, that every worker, every gig worker should receive decent pay, and that pay should be, given to them in a timely manner, not, with delays. It should be, commensurate with the period when the task was completed. And then fair conditions, like protection from risks at work. And we've had stories, all kinds of stories, things happening to, like, drivers being abducted and carjacked and all sorts of things. So what happens? What happens to you? What's the responsibility of the platform that you're working for when such a thing happens to you? It just can't be left open to, we are just contracted you, so if you get abducted or killed, sorry. That just can't be the situation. So, and then the third is fair contract, so that the terms and conditions and pricing and every little thing is transparent, not just in a document that has a lot of legal jargon in a way that this person is not able to make sense of the terms and conditions that they're working with, and those fine print getting pulled out when there's a situation that the platform needs to defend itself against. And then fair management is, at least there should be a clear process when a gig worker has a complaint or any sort of issue. There should be a very clear process that they're able to follow, and it being not just like a customer care number or a call center number or an email, but there should be clear and equitable outcomes, such that there should be like a service charter of within what period should an issue be resolved, and what kind of response should be given to different kinds of issues. And then fair representation for gig workers to have the right to, form groups which they can use to collectively make negotiations, and for the platforms to commit to cooperate with such requests for negotiations. So I think fair work is I'm not very familiar with how far WEF has gone on the ground, but I'm aware that Fair Work is doing a lot of work in Africa. In South Africa, they're very, very active, and I think globally they are in 20 countries already. So I'm aware that they are the strongest. If I would speak about my experience, and because they're doing the work, not just, they're doing both research and advocacy, so that whatever they are advocating for is backed by empirical scientific data of what's happening on the ground. So having such benchmarks of how gig workers should be treated, both by the platforms they're working for and the customers, is one of the best ways to ensure that, the welfare of the gig workers is taken care of, and they're doing that as a source of livelihood and not feeling caught that I must do this. I can't stop being a rider because I will go hungry. It should be, they should have the same, level of pride and contentment as they do the job as someone else who wakes up and to go to the office. I think now that ties to on the attitude side, and Felix mentioned that, I think there is a lot of digital literacy training that needs to happen. That's one of the needs, because as Felix mentioned, there is an attitude thing where I don't know whether it's a mistrust or just because technology has been, diffusion of technology in Africa has been slower. So we have less experience with technology compared to developed countries. I think that's an issue of, sometimes wanting to see things and like hard cash. I'm happy that moving from hard cash to mobile money wasn't too difficult for us. But I think for people to agree, like to shop online and get things delivered, there is still something that needs to happen there. And also attitude, not attitudes only on the consumer side, but also on, in people's minds, for me to feel like I am a graduate and it doesn't take any dignity away from me if I decide to drive an Uber. Because at the end of the day, it's about livelihood. There are people who are working in offices and they're stressed and they want to quit, but they can't quit because that's what pays their rent. So we should get to the level where the person that gets a job in an office and keeps that job, and the person that decides to write articles online or drive an Uber or rent Airbnbs, they should feel, the same level of pride in understanding that this life is about making a meet and getting a satisfaction from what you do. And some of the advantages of being a gig worker is you can do several different things. You can be an artist who maybe before your art starts paying, you're still paying your bills. So it gives you even more flexibility than an office job that is paying your rent would do. So I think that level of literacy to understand what does it mean to be a gig worker. And also even at a family level, I can imagine if I graduated today and told my mother that I want to go be a rider delivering, because it would be a very uncomfortable conversation. So we need it, from the ground up, so find more of those situations where families are looking down on their sons or daughters because they're doing gig work, because there are people who are holding jobs, white collar jobs, and they're stressed and they can't quit because same pressure. So we just need to understand that pressure is pressure, and as a society be more open and welcoming to this new way of life, this new way of livelihoods. And I think I can't remember whether it was John or Felix that mentioned internet access. I think it was Felix. Internet access obviously is a big either enabler or barrier to how quickly we're able to move, because for someone who is in a place that has no internet access, or internet access is expensive, they're going to have to do things the good old way. So we need internet access and affordability to be, incrementally enhanced, especially in urban areas. It's good. But what we don't want to have is for the gig economy to expand and for that to also increase the digital divide. And that is already an issue where you have the people who are higher up on the social pyramid, who they're tech savvy and they're well off. They are the ones who currently you would say are getting the biggest benefits from the gig economy, because they get the convenience and flexibility that, they can take an Airbnb, take an Uber to an Airbnb and call a delivery. So you would say that there are people who are currently reaping more benefits, because if you think about it, then these services, compared to the kind of convenience they give you, the higher up you are on the social pyramid, the less you even feel like you just need that convenience for you not to drive to a place. Maybe if you went out partying, you just want, someone will pick me up and drop me at home, and I can order some food on the way. So there, in terms of the benefits, it's still not balanced. You still have more benefits going higher up in the social pyramid, while the breadcrumbs are flowing down, but we would like it to be a little bit more balanced, and that's where these kinds of advocacy and frameworks will come into play to balance that out, so that you have people who are earning a decent livelihood from this, while they offer the convenience that that people who are able to pay for those services need in their lives. So I think that would be my comments about the kind of challenges that we anticipate, challenges that are already there, and what can probably be done about it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Very good insights and just very honest observations about how the response you'd get having graduated from law school and saying that I now want to offer my service as a dancer in a gig. The response you'd get to that within Kenya, for instance, not a very good response.
Sorry, I was going to say your father would ask for the school fees back.
I know, yeah. And it's fair to say it's not across every African country. So, for instance, like in South Africa, if you can look at even the different focus, even within school, like theater and arts and plays and dance, you literally find someone seriously taking their dancing and they're doing a master's in dancing. And because it's based on, this is what I enjoy doing and this is what I'll do, and I'll work through the gigs to get this done. But Jane, coming to you, if you could make comments, especially from your perspective of Uganda, and also from your current living Bermuda, like how do you compare them in terms of like the adoption and the attitude towards the gig economy, and also your remarks on what are the prospects when you look at Uganda, like what would you look at and say, this, if someone could focus more about on this, or if this attitude could change, or if these policies could change, then the economy would pick up.
All right. Thanks a lot. Just to answer the first question in trying to compare the gig economy in Bermuda, where I currently live, versus Uganda, I think I'll just borrow from what Felix explained earlier on in his comparison of the United States and Kenya. Now, Bermuda is a developed country, and I would pretty much compare it to the United States. And the main difference for me that I see comparing the gig economy here and the one in Uganda, again, comes down to the attitudes that people have towards this kind of work and towards making money out of this kind of economy. Again, going back to Uganda, we are still traditional in nature. We all want to be doctors and accountants and lawyers and hopefully build a career in that way. Then it's only those that really fail to get jobs in that line of work that then look to the gig economy as an alternative. However, those attitudes are starting to change. Coming to Bermuda, again, just like any other place, most people would desire to build a career in the traditional professions or lines of work. However, even those that have branched off and have opted into the gig economy, they're never looked down upon. Actually, they're even respected. And if someone, for example, branches out and starts a business, they're usually applauded by the society, and you really see the support. Again, it goes back to the attitudes that people have towards this kind of work, and maybe the understanding of making a living. So I would say that's the main difference that I see. Again, looking at the trends in Uganda and going back to my earlier submission, the advent of the internet, more money being pumped into this economy. So, for example, having the big players, Uber and Airbnb and different PE funds or venture capitalists putting their money down to support the gig economy will start to change these attitudes. Because I think these attitudes are really driven by, first of all, who invested their time in the gig economy initially. It was mostly the informal sector or people that we looked at as failures, or who had failed to make a living through what we think is the original or traditional channel and opted for this as a last resort. But a lot of that is starting to change, because we now see even professionals getting into the gig economy and trying to make a living out of it. So that eventually we'll get there, and the attitudes will try to change. It might take some time, but I think we're on that path. Getting to your second question, and which is on what are the prospects for the gig economy, and I want to look at it from the opportunities that it presents and zero down on the point of employment and unemployment. So currently in Uganda, which is also the story for most of Africa, there's very high levels of unemployment. There's not enough jobs within the traditional sector to employ all our young people. And because the gig economy coupled with the internet opens up a whole avenue through which people can then sell their services, this has presented a lot of opportunity for a lot of our unemployed people, or even people that are not skilled in the traditional professions, to be able to make a living and earn a living. And we can almost say that, the gig economy will help solve the problem of unemployment. But there are caveats to that. We might solve the issue of unemployment, but then we might create a problem of underemployment, which many times borders almost slavery and exploitation. And again, I'll try and relate that to Rebecca's submission earlier on. A lot of people who work in the gig economy, more so if you're subscribed to a platform or a much bigger player, are susceptible to exploitation. An example is Uber. I don't have the specifics of the cases there, but I think I've seen something before where there was different people that worked for Uber, didn't think they were getting a fair share of their services. And, this is even made worse by the fact that a lot of the regulations or even policies at the national level haven't caught up yet with the gig economy. They are not well regulated. No one really knows what's going on in that sector. And, hopefully, again, going back to Rebecca's submission, that, the discussions that are currently happening at the World Economic Forum and the other organization will come in and try and solve some of the issues around welfare for the people that work in this economy, more so those that are subscribed to larger players are well taken care of. So I think the prospects are very good in terms of solving the issue of unemployment, but we have to be a little careful in terms of how that will be done and making sure the right processes are followed, the right regulations and policies are put in place to protect these people that work in this economy. And once this is done, hopefully even the attitudes of the masses in general will start to change as the economy gets a little more respect and more attention as a legitimate way to earn a living.
Thanks a lot for those comments. Felix, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to say something about what Gina just said. In terms of regulating it and ensuring that everybody is treated fairly, I think there also needs to be a shift in the regulatory in terms of the labor laws, because I feel at this point the way the labor laws are constituted, they are mostly tailored towards the formal sector, and the employer-employee relationship, it does not take into account the gig economy, because the gig economy, you're not my employer. I'm not employed under you, but I only serve for a limited time. So I don't think they get the gig workers don't get covered by the labor laws. So in my opinion, there also needs to be actually a shift in that one, and they actually need to, it's almost like an update of the laws to catch up with the oncoming trends that what is happening currently. That will be the thing that would probably move it from being viewed as it could be a detrimental in terms of exploitation to something that this is a legitimate source of income.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree more. And especially because I've read somewhere someone comparing the possible outcome of the gig workers being what in the past would be workers wake up in the morning, go sit somewhere, an employer comes, takes them at will, tells them go to the plantation, do this and that, and then they fire you at will. They can tell you go away, they may not pay you, and then you are not guaranteed of any work. So it's just a queue. I mean, it was just an explanation of what, unless the labor laws catch up with that, like for instance, how do you deal with when someone is sick? Right now, if you have formal employment, you can get paid sick leave. If a lady goes on maternity leave, they will be paid for that period. But if you're working through the gig economy, most times you really have to work through those periods. So it's quite. I think I agree. Labor laws need to catch up with that. And good thing is that I think we will have a discussion at some point, which I will invite lawyers to crack their brains on how the labor laws could catch up with that. So if we could get your closing remarks, I will start with Jane. If you could give your closing remarks on the topic, and then Becky, and then Felix, then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, thanks a lot. Again, the gig economy. When I was preparing for this discussion, there's just so much. It's a whole different world. I don't think 1 hour or 2 hours alone are enough for us to dissect and consider all the issues. So I'm hoping maybe at some point we shall revisit it. More so, listening to the different presenters, it's very clear that there's a lot of opportunities that it presents. There's so many challenges to discuss, and there's so many considerations to look at. So I'm hoping we'll have, or rather, more opportunities to discuss and dissect the gig economy. But my closing remarks will be, again, from where I sit as an observer. There's so much that can be done through the gig economy. Again, just moving away from what we've traditionally seen as gig economies. Most of our examples have been Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, Glove. But that is, I think, just one, aspect of it. There's more and more professionals, accountants and lawyers, starting to embrace the gig economy and providing their services directly to their consumers, as opposed to doing it through an institution or being institutionalized. So it presents a lot of opportunities, not just for what's considered the informal sector, but also for the formal sector. And because of the breadth of the market, even the competition that comes with the gig economy alone is not an impediment towards accessing that market, because the gig economy is literally targeting each and every one of us. But the only different thing is that we're dealing directly with a service provider. So in closing, there's a lot of opportunities for the gig economy, and a lot more attention should be paid towards it because of its potential to solve a lot of the problems that we face as a community especially in Africa. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jane, for that. Becky, your closing remarks, please.
Oh, this has been very interesting, especially getting the different perspectives and being able to, juxtapose where we are in Africa versus in developed countries. But my closing remarks are, just 3 points. And the first one, as I would agree with John, that we have a good opportunity in our hands that we should definitely exploit, because it's addressing one of the biggest problems, which is high unemployment, which is predicted to continue, but the gig economy is likely to help us with that problem. But the second one is advocacy. While we wait for the laws, for the national laws, as we know, not just in the gig economy or digital transformation, but generally national laws are way behind from catching up with different areas of technology, be it cybersecurity or other areas. So while we wait for the laws to catch up, I think our current bet is on advocacy, both, from all angles. From us as users, we need to be aware of what the workers are going through and take any opportunity to participate in any kind of place where public participation is invited, to make sure that we are looking out for the welfare of the gig workers. Because if the workers are treated well, the gig economy serves to collectively benefit us as a society in the sense that it will be a profitable venture for the companies who develop and maintain the technology. It will be a sustainable source of livelihood for the workers. And for us as society, as individuals, we'll be able to enjoy the convenience and flexibility that that these services provide us. But for us to do that, there's still work that needs to be done. And I also can't fail to highlight that one of the other major issues that has been noted with the gig economy is, it's embedding some of the traditional inequalities that we've had and for generations. For example, like gender inequality, you have very few female riders, very few female drivers. So as part of the literacy that we were talking about and changes in attitude, you have, for example, Sweep South is a platform it's South African, but they've recently expanded to Kenya. It's a domestic work platform where you can dial a cleaner and, say whether you want them to come and clean or just iron something for you and things like that. You have, even on their website, when you go to Sweep South website, it's just photos of women. Or whenever there is an ad for Uber, or there's a recent one that launched here called Didi, the Chinese one, the ads are all male drivers. So we are embedding the traditional inequalities onto the gig economy. And I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed, so that if I have the opportunity and the competence, I'm a good driver, and I feel like, I would like to be a rider, to be doing deliveries in my free time, I should feel as a woman that it's a safe place for me to be able to make an income that way. Like, I think in my whole life of riding for the last couple of years, I've only ridden in 3 vehicles driven by ladies. So that's an issue. And it shows itself even on the surface, as the example I've given, that we are embedding those traditional gender roles, even in the kind of branding that we do and advertisement that we're doing. So that's also another issue that I can't fail to highlight, because we are talking about, you're in the 21st century. There's probably a man out there who enjoys cooking and cleaning, and if they say they're going to sign up on Sweep South, people are going to scream. So we need to be also conscious, as we do advocacy for welfare. We also need to do other kinds of public awareness and other forms of literacy, so that we make sure that we don't carry over these inequalities into the new world that we're entering. Yeah.
Becky, thanks a lot. Those are very good observations. Felix, your closing remarks.
Okay. All right. To me, the gig economy almost seems like trade. It benefits both. It creates efficiency in terms of companies are able to get the best skilled workers for the right jobs, and also to some extent make sure that people are well compensated for the work they do. Having said that, also the thing is, we still have a way to go, and even the education system has a way to go, because we need to shift to where people work best under any circumstance. Like a competency-based system would work best to support the gig economy, because you develop the skills that you have an interest in. And that's you would need anybody to actually employ you. You just get on the app, say that this is what I offer, and I'm pretty sure with the way the development is happening in East Africa, there will be a lot of opportunities for anybody offering the right skills, or any skills for that matter, because the economy is growing in all areas, and that would present opportunities for people. And also it also moves you from the point of being an employee to actually managing yourself. And in this case, it just brings in a lot of all manners of like social disciplines, like just being managing your own time, being independent by yourself, and not expecting somebody to actually put in like some time for you, like you need to be here 9 to 5. But you can be able to manage your own time, and that goes even to your work-life balance. You can be able to balance your time, and if you need to spend time with your family, spend it there. When you need to work, go and work. That would seem to me like a win-win. But to achieve that, there's a lot that has to go in there. And there's a lot of support that is required from the government, from the people themselves, from the education system, from the regulators. That would be my closing remarks.
Okay, Felix, thanks a lot. And I think a last thing that from observation that I would like to mention is also in the past, like the formal sector employment has been also very regulated. So for instance, being a lawyer myself, the law society, like for instance of Kenya, and for most the legal profession, whether it's in Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, is very regulated to the extent that, like on Upwork, rarely will you go find a lawyer advertising their services, because you see advertising for lawyers is prohibited in most places. Or and then also like for accountants, like those traditional professions have been very regulated, so that for instance, even for an accountant, for you even to go offer your services and something, there's a form of regulation and license or something that you need, which you find is quite different. Like for instance, someone who has skills like IT skills or coding skills or software development skills, they are a bit more fluid and flexible to do some of these things. So I think some of those entrenched regulations may also limit how much latitude there is for someone within some of the formal employment sectors to be able to explore within the gig economies. But then I think to be able to uplift the gig economy equally, the formal employment needs also to be relaxed in a way that it can also transition to the gig side. But thanks a lot, everyone, for your contributions tonight. This has been very enlightening discussion, demystifying this entire gig economy discussion within East Africa. And I am grateful that you guys came on tonight. And anyone who listens to this discussion later on, you can leave your comments and you can participate in the conversation. The whole point is to have these kinds of idea sharing across Africa. Thanks a lot, everyone, and have a good night.